He came to these woods for one thing: silence. The steady echo of his axe biting into pine trunks, the cold air filling his lungs, and the solitude that followed. Calls of birds and the rustle of needles underfoot, every sound a small reminder that he was alive. Ezekiel Zeke Hammond, rugged as the trees he felled, wore loneliness like a second skin. Once a man of town and family, he'd retreated here after losses no amount of whiskey could numb. His wife's laughter carried off by fever, his son carried off by fate. Townsfolk whispered about the grizzled hermit deep in buckthorn forest, but none dared follow him down the winding logging trail. He wanted no company, only the fire in his belly for fresh fallen timber. Until the day the trader arrived. The man appeared at dusk, a wisp of smoke on the horizon where the logging camp met the pines. His cart, laden with knickknacks and second-hand wares, sprouted lanterns and tarps like a twisted carnival. Zeke watched him approach on horseback, wary as any wild animal. The trader unhitched and set down a burlap sack with a clatter that echoed over the sawdust piles. "Got something mighty special today?" the trader drawled, voice slick with promises. "Exotic, rare, and only $2. Zeke tilted his head beneath the brim of his stovepipe hat. "I don't want no fuss or company." The trader's eyes glittered. "Neither does she, until you remove that sack." He slapped the burlap with a grin. Zeke's fingers itched beside his axe. For a moment he thought it was a mule or some fancy tool, maybe a new saw to speed his work. But the trader whispered as if sharing a secret meant only for forest shadows. "She's a woman, mister, bought and bound to do your bidding, yours to claim, for only 2 silver coins." Zeke's heart kicked against his ribs. A woman? He hadn't seen one in these parts since his wife. The notion made him ache, longing and guilt in a bitter swirl. Yet nothing in him shouted to refuse the offer. $2 was a pittance, if what the trader claimed was true. Zeke stared at the sack, knuckles white on his axe haft. Night pressed close, the only light the trader's lantern and the dusky glow beyond treetops. He could turn away, banish the memory of warm flesh and quiet conversation, or he could loosen the ties and see what fate had brought him. His jaw set, Zeke kicked the sack. It rolled toward him, a silent promise of redemption or damnation. He reached down, yanked a cord, and peeled back the burlap. The burlap fell away in a dusty swirl, revealing a figure crouched in the lantern's glow. Zeke's breath hitched as he recognized her, not a wild-eyed captive, but a woman as striking as a rose in winter, raven hair cascading over a high-collared wool dress, eyes the color of exposed pine bark, cheeks flushed with cold or fear. He couldn't tell which. She rose, hands bound in front with rough hemp, chin lifted in defiance. Her voice, low and steady, broke the hush. "You bought me for $2. You own me, Lumberjack. What will you do?" Zeke's axe handle throbbed in his grip. Rage, shame, and an unexpected ache warred inside him. He remembered his wife's gentle laugh, the softness of her skin beneath his hand. He'd come here to escape desire, and here it was, offering itself in the wilderness. The trader cleared his throat. "She's yours, friend. Name's Delia Hayes. Silver locket, sure sign of genteel upbringing, will serve you honest." He tipped his hat and melted back into the shadows with a wink. Zeke's jaw clenched. He took a step forward, met Delia's unwavering gaze. "Why'd you let him bind you?" His voice cracked, guilt and anger lacing every word. Delia's lips curved in a ghost of a smile. "I wasn't running from you. I was running from them." Her eyes burned. They said I owed a debt I couldn't pay. I chose this, anything to live. She lifted her chin. Take off these ropes, Lumberjack, or leave me to wander these pines alone. Her words struck him like a blow. He sank the butt of his axe in the dirt and knelt, hands trembling as he undid the knots. Ropes fell away like shackles, and she rubbed her wrists, meeting his gaze with gratitude that set his chest ablaze. When the last knot slipped free, Delia reached up, her fingers brushing his calloused hands. "Thank you." The word was a whisper, but its warmth spread through Zeke more surely than any campfire. He stood, dusting sawdust from his sleeves. "We'll talk at my cabin," he said gruffly, voice thick. "You'll have shelter." "Food?" He hesitated. "And then we'll figure the rest." Delia nodded, stepping into the clearing. The night wind whispered through the pines, and for a fleeting moment Zeke heard possibility, the promise of redemption, not just for her, but for himself. As he led her toward the lamplit path home, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would bloom from their desperate bargain. The cabin sat at the edge of Zeke's claimed timberline, a single-room structure of weathered logs and a pitched roof patched with tin. He swung open the door, lantern in hand, and she stepped across the threshold, brushing snowflakes from her skirts. The warmth hit her first, crackling flames in the stone hearth and the sweet smell of pine smoke. Zeke closed the door and set his rifle by the corner. "Sit," he grunted, nodding toward the lone rocking chair by the hearth. Delia settled into it, skirt rustling, eyes wary in the lantern glow. Zeke dumped a sack of dried venison and beans onto the rough-hewn table. "I'll fix supper," he said, pulling a kettle toward the fire. She watched him work, chopping kindling, pouring water, adding venison to the simmering pot. In the firelight, his broad shoulders softened, and she remembered why she'd risked capture to find shelter. When the stew boiled, Zeke ladled bowls for them both. He slid one to Delia, who inhaled the savory steam. She wrapped her gloved fingers around the bowl's edge. "Thank you," she said again, voice hushed. Zeke settled opposite her on a wooden crate. He studied her in the flickering shadows, as if trying to read a map of her past in the lines of her face. At last, he broke the silence. "Who's after you?" he asked, tone guarded. Delia's eyes darkened, sorrow and steel interwoven. She lifted the stew, spooned a careful taste, then set the bowl aside. "My husband," she whispered, voice small. He gambled away our ranch, took every penny. When I refused to surrender myself to settle his debts, he sent men to hunt me." She clenched her fists. "I'd rather risk the cold woods than return to that life." Zeke's jaw tightened. He remembered the ache of betrayal, his wife's departure only in his dreams now. Guilt stirred at him for this stranger, thrown into the same hell. He reached across the table, thumb brushing her knuckles. "You're safe here," he said quietly. Delia met his gaze, a flicker of relief and something deeper passing between them. "I hope so," she replied. They ate in silence, the shadows dancing as the fire crackled. When the bowls were empty, Zeke stood and fetched blankets from a peg behind the door. He laid one for her on the far side of the cabin's single cot. She hesitated as he handed it over. "Sleep here," he said, voice gentle. "Ropes or no, a lady deserves comfort." She accepted the blanket, warmth flooding her through the chill of her past. "Thank you, Zeke," she breathed. He turned away, gathering dishes. The quiet stretched between them, hesitant, charged. When he finally faced her, He offered a simple nod and a promise in his steady eyes. Rest easy. Tomorrow we plan how you'll get clear of your debts. Delia settled on the cot, pulling the blanket around her. Before sleep claimed her, she murmured, "You've given me more than $2 worth, Lumberjack." Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. Inside, by firelight, two broken souls found the fragile stirrings of hope and the promise of redemption born from a desperate bargain in the Wild West. Dawn's pale light filtered through the cabin window as Zeke stoked the embers into a steady flame. Delia stirred on the cot, blanket drawn tight, eyes heavy but alert. He ladled fresh stew into 2 tin cups and set one beside her before lifting his own. "We'll ride out at first light," Zeke said, voice low. "I can get you to Carson's Pass. From there, you'll find a stage to Red River City and a ship east." Delia cradled the cup, gazing into the dark broth as if searching for courage. "Thank you," she whispered, "but I have nothing to pay for passage, no money but that silver locket." She reached beneath her dress, unclasped the delicate chain, and held the locket out in trembling fingers. "Take this. Sell it for the fair." Zeke's hand hovered, then closed around the locket. "This belonged to you." Her lip quivered. "My honor was already pawned. My husband claims what I owe in coin or in any way he chooses." She met Zeke's eyes steadily. "I can offer myself to pay my debt. I'd rather be free than bound by silver or by shame." The words hung between them like smoke in the cold cabin. Zeke's fist tightened around the locket. He set his cup down, turned away to hide the raging conflict in his eyes. After a long moment he spoke, voice rough as gravel road. "You're not cattle to be traded for passage. I'll find another way." Delia rose, stepping unsteadily toward him. "I've lived on men's charity and lust too long. This," she pressed a hand to her chest, "is all I've left to offer." Zeke placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your freedom means more than any coin or any body. I'll ride into town and barter my lumber or work an extra week at the mill. You'll go home with honor." Tears glistened in Delia's eyes. She reached up and brushed his beard. "You," her voice caught, "you've already paid my price." Before he could reply, a sharp rap sounded on the door. Zeke stiffened. Delia's eyes snapped open in alarm. He crouched beside her and murmured, "Hide." Delia vanished into the shadowed corner. Zeke moved to the door and opened it a crack. Outside stood a gaunt man in a threadbare suit, one of her husband's bailiffs, with 2 deputies behind him, rifles at rest, but eyes cold. "Mrs. Hayes," the bailiff called, "by order of Judge Whitmore, you're to come with us. Your husband demands your return." Zeke's spine stiffened. He stepped forward into the doorway. "She's under my protection." The bailiff smirked. "You're just a lumberjack, friend. Move aside or we'll drag her out." Zeke's hand hovered above his axe. Inside, Delia's soft gasp urged him to choose. Outside, the bailiff's deputies advanced on the threshold. In that moment, Zeke realized the true cost of compassion and the length he must go to defend it. Zeke planted his feet wide, axe handle resting on the floorboards like a silent oath. The bailiff's deputies shifted, rifles aiming for the cabin's single window. Delia emerged, shoulders squared, eyes fierce with defiance and fear. "Don't touch her," Zeke growled. His voice, low and immovable, carried the weight of every fallen pine he'd felled in these woods. The bailiff chuckled, stepping forward beneath the lantern's flicker. "We have a writ, Lumberjack. You'll hand her over, or we'll bring her out by force, and you'll answer for obstruction." Zeke's grip tightened on the axe. "I answer for no man's writ," he replied. "This cabin's under my roof. Cross that threshold, and you'll answer to me." One deputy raised his rifle. Zeke lunged, axe arcing in a single, powerful sweep that splintered the door's bottom rail, but stopped short of bloodshed. The wood exploded in shards, and the deputies leapt back, hands raised, rifles lowering in shock. Delia's voice rang clear. "Please, no more violence." She stepped between them, her boundless courage shining in the lantern light. "I owe you nothing but my life. If you must arrest me, do so without hurting him." The bailiff hesitated, eyes flicking from Delia's steady gaze to Zeke's unyielding stance. Outside, a wind gust rattled the logs. Somewhere deep in the forest, a lone wolf bayed, as if acknowledging Zeke's stand. At last, the bailiff lowered his eyes. "Very well," he said grudgingly. "We'll take her, no force, but you'll come with us, too, for obstruction of federal officers." Zeke exhaled, lowering the axe. He reached for Delia's hand. "Only if you promise to walk free," he whispered. Delia nodded, brushing sawdust from his sleeve. "I promise." Trumpeting hooves sounded in the distance, a patrol of U.S. Marshals drawn by the commotion. The bailiff's face paled. We'll wait for them," he stammered. Zeke stepped aside. "Then come in," he said quietly. "Delia, you're safe, for now." The bailiff ushered Delia into the night's chill. Zeke followed last, axe slung across his back. As the deputies and bailiff mounted their horses, he paused at the threshold and met Delia's eyes. "Hold on to your promise," he said. She pressed his hand, and dawn's first light caught the glint of her gratitude and the unspoken vow of redemption born from a lonely lumberjack's fierce heart. They rode into Ridgecrest as the sun broke the horizon, painting the town's wooden storefronts in pale gold. Delia sat tall in the saddle, the sheriff's writ clenched in her gloved hand. Zeke followed, axe strapped to his pack, a silent sentinel by her side. Townsfolk peered from porches. Children stopped mid-chore to watch the pair pass. At the courthouse steps, Sheriff Mallory greeted them with a stern nod. "Miss Hayes, you'll stand before Judge Whitmore. Mr. Hammond, you'll answer for obstructing process." His deputy unlocked the cell door, but Zeke remained by Delia's side. Inside the packed courtroom, wooden benches creaking under anxious bodies, Delia stepped forward. Judge Whitmore, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, peered over his spectacles. "Delia Hayes," he intoned, "you are accused of evading lawful service. How do you plead?" Delia lifted her chin. "Not guilty, Your Honor. I sought protection from violence, not to evade justice." The bailiff stepped up, paper-waving. "Judge, Miss Hayes owes a debt. Her husband's creditors have legal right to recover assets." Zeke's voice rang out from the gallery. "Your Honor, she has no assets left, only this locket," he said, holding it aloft. "She gave it for passage. She's paid her debts." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Zeke laid out the truth, the bailiff's threats, Delia's flight, and Zeke's stand. Judge Whitmore listened, brow furrowed. Then he addressed Delia's husband's attorney. "Is this justice?" the judge asked. "Chasing a woman through pines, binding her, and then hauling her before me?" He tapped the locket. "This no longer holds value. Her debt is satisfied by her ordeal, and refuge provided." The attorney paled. "Your Honor." Judge Whitmore raised a hand. "Case dismissed. Miss Hayes is free. Mr. Hammond's obstruction was in defense of life and liberty, qualities I find worthy of pardon. He pounded the gavel. Court adjourned. A cheer rose, echoing under rafters. Delia exhaled, relief flooding her features. Zeke's axe handle throbbed at his side, but he only smiled, relief and pride shining in his eyes. As they left the courtroom into the bright morning, Delia slipped her hand into Zeke's. "You kept your promise," she said softly. Zeke tipped his hat. "Your freedom was the only debt I'd ever collect." And in that new day light on the dusty courthouse steps, two wounded souls found justice and a fragile spark of trust that would reshape both their destinies beneath the endless western sky. Word of Zeke's stand and Delia's exoneration swept through Buckthorn Forest like wildfire. By midday, the Dawson logging camp buzzed with celebration. Men hoisted mugs of spiced apple cider, and the cook's skillet sizzled with fresh bacon. Zeke and Delia rode into the clearing hand in hand, greeted by cheers that echoed off the pines. Zeke tipped his hat to the foreman, Grant McAllister, who clasped his arm in hearty congratulations. "Didn't know you had it in you, Lumberjack." Delia laughed, the sound bright as sun on frost. She slipped from her saddle, embraced the cook, and thanked each logger for their support. Under the rough-hewn shelter of the bunkhouse, she and Zeke found a quiet moment. "I owe you more than my freedom," she said, voice soft. "You've given me a home." Zeke's gaze softened. "Home's wherever we stand together." He reached into his coat and produced Delia's locket, now polished to a warm glow. "Your locket's returned," he said, "but the real treasure," he pressed a simple silver ring into her palm, "is here." Tears brimmed in Delia's eyes as she slipped the ring onto her finger. Around them, the loggers raised their mugs in salute as Zeke slid his arm around her shoulder. That evening, by the crackling fire outside the cook shack, Zeke and Delia vowed to build a new life among the pines. The cabins would be rebuilt, the heartwood milled, and a bright future sawed from the timber of their pasts. Under the western stars, with the scent of cedar in the air and lanterns swinging in the breeze, two lonely souls found love, redemption, and the promise of forever, woven into every log and beam of their shared frontier home. Seasons turned on Buckthorn Ridge, each ring in the towering pines a testament to time's passage. Spring's blossoms gave way to summer's emerald canopy, to autumn's golden blaze, and finally to winter's hush of snow. In the heart of it all stood Zeke and Delia's cabin, a sturdy structure of cedar beams and hand-hewn timbers, smoke curling from its stone chimney like a promise kept. Inside, the hearth glowed with midday warmth. Delia hummed as she kneaded dough, teaching their young daughter, named Petunia for the runaway sow, how to shape biscuits. Zeke stepped in from the chill, axe slung over his shoulder, and carefully hung his work gloves on a peg. He kissed Delia's cheek and ruffled their daughter's hair, the ring on her finger catching the firelight. Outside, the logging camp had transformed into a small community. Former drifters laid foundations for their own cabins. The cook published the first forest newsletter. Grant McAllister taught children to write by the glow of kerosene lamps. And among them, Zeke mentored young lumberjacks, showing them not just how to fell trees, but how to stand for what's right. One crisp evening, Delia and Zeke walked along the ridge. Petunia nestled in Delia's arms. The pines loomed overhead, their needles whispering ancient lullabies. Zeke pointed toward the horizon where the sun bled into the sky. "We found more than timber in these woods," he said softly. "We found home." Delia rested her head on his shoulder, and we built it together. As darkness settled, they raised lanterns, and around them laughter and music rose from the cabin below. Under the endless western sky, their legacy stood firm, etched not in bark or stone, but in shared courage, reclaimed honor, and the enduring power of love in the wild frontier.